Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the Kaivalyam is almost like building that divine perspective or Ekatattva Vyasa, the Visheshana, always seeing divinity in all situations and yet playing into it. So just cultivating a Sankhya perspective is literally what freedom is all about.
In other words, it's not just escaping the Prakriti, but participating with all the seeing the divinity everywhere.
And then, well, knowing that, to get there, we have to do all this abhyasa and all the yama and niyama and all those things need to be cultivated to be able to do that. It's just not knowing it.
Yeah, that's why we have 3 sets of abhyasas. If the mind is already in the ekagra chitta, out of the 5 chitta bhumis, if the mind is in the ekagra place, you don't need to do any of the yama niyama. I mean, yama niyama will come naturally to them. Let me put it that way. It's not an abhyasa for them.
Yeah.
So the most important abhyasa for them to reach Kaivalyam is the Ekatattva abhyasa. Ekatattva means Purusha Tattva.
Yes.
Because Purusha is Eka, Prakriti is Aneka, 24 Tattvas.
Then at that time you become transcending the body and everything because you have the awareness of Nitya Sukha Atma.
Yes. By the way, what Sriniji said, let me highlight that. We didn't cover that. What Sriniji said is Nitya Shuchi Sukha Atma. Those are the 4 attributes that Patanjali says the Purusha or the Ishvara has. 4 attributes of the Purusha. This second chapter, 5th sutra. Anitya Shuchi Dukkhanatmasu Nitya Shuchi Sukhatma Khyatira Vidya. So here he defines avidya. Avidya is seeing the opposite of that. So first he presents the opposite. Anitya, Ashuchi, Dukkha, Anatma. But that is not the self. What is the self is Nitya, Shuchi, Sukha, Atma. So the self is Nitya, eternal. Shuchi means it's always pure. That means it's like a diamond. Even when it goes to a gutter, it retains its value. You just have to clean it on the surface and it's still brilliant. So even when the Purusha goes through a life experience, even if it is miserable experience, the Purusha doesn't get touched at all. It remains in its original pure space. And then Nitya Shuchi Sukha, happiness. It is in the space, established in the place of happiness. And then Atma. Atma means indivisible. It cannot be cut. Nitya Shuchi Sukha Atma. There's one more sutra in the 4th chapter where Patanjali also describes the Atma. Actually, a couple of sutras also in the 2nd chapter, which we already discussed, that the Purusha is like a witness, simply watching the movie screen of the Chitta Vrittis called Pratyaya. And then in the 4th chapter, there's one more sutra. I think it's 18th sutra, the 4th chapter. It says, Sada jnatas chitta vrittayas tatprabho purushasya parinamitvat. Sada jnata. It is always knowing what is there in the chitta vrittis. Sada jnatas chitta vrittayaha. Tat prabho. Prabho means the controller or the owner of that, the master of the chitta vrittis. Sada jnatas chitta vrittayas tat prabho purushasya aparinamitvat. The Purusha cannot be changed. It is constant. Parinama means transformation or change. Purusha is in the place of aparinama. You cannot change it. You cannot modify it. It is constant. It is always the same.
I just have a clarification question. When you say something like which perspective or utilize the perspective or vantage point of Ishvara, does that mean use the chitta of Ishvara? Or is that like an unrelated point?
You could think like if Ishvara had a chitta,
okay,
then what image will be there in that chitta?
Along the lines of like having multiple chittas, I was wondering if that is where this fed into it. But okay.
So when we talk about the Ishvara's perspective, sometimes it may not be obvious. What is Ishvara's perspective? If I knew Ishvara's perspective, I would be an Ishvara, right? So here is one abhyasa we can play here, like a game we can play. What we can do is, okay, let me think this thought. Does this thought feel good? Okay. If I see an angry person, say, and if I say, this is a bad person, does it feel good to me? Do I feel good labeling and judging and condemning people as a bad person? It doesn't feel good. Therefore, I am not in the perspective with Ishvara's thought. Let me change my perspective. Experiment with a few other thoughts. If we think, oh, he's a very kind person, does it feel good? It may not feel good because it's opposing to Satyam. In that moment, they are expressing rage. So it doesn't feel good. Maybe they are kind in their heart, but they know not who they are. They are just in a state of pain now. That is what is compelling them into this anger or rage. That's what is happening. How does that feel? Maybe better. Maybe that is what Ishvara is thinking. You see? So like that, you reposition. You find the best thought that produces the highest emotion. Maybe we still have not found what Ishvara is really thinking. But at least we are closer and closer to that perspective.
Okay.
Then in each situation, you also create different spheres of Ishvara, just like the God you talked about, home God and then this God. So it's just like at any point in time, the stage sets like the Ishvara boundary, like in a home or in the company what would a CEO do? Or when it comes to the freedom that we are celebrating today, because when you go to the universe Ishvara, America's interest may not be aligned with somebody else's interest. But when you have to guard the thing, you have to believe that you are the Ishvara of the United States.
That's a good example. Let me give like some a concrete example. If somebody wants to be a CEO, or if somebody wants to start a company, perhaps they might be thinking, what would Elon Musk do now? If somebody wants to be a great scholar in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, they may not think of Elon Musk as a role model. You see, or I don't know, maybe he has read the Yoga Sutra, I don't know. So the point is, you look at an inspiring role model. In fact, that is how we use Ishvara in Ishvara Pranidhana, inspiring role model. Vitaraga Vishayam Va Chittam. Vitaraga Vishayam Va Chittam. Pour your awareness to that entity, to that inspiring example, enlightened person. Anujaji has a question.
How this duality, there's a witness when you're witnessing, is a duality still. I'm witnessing this. When it will merge to move into the non-duality?
In fact, Patanjali's perspective, Patanjali Yoga Sutras is fully entrenched in the dual perspective.
Right.
It is not in the Advaitic perspective because it is rooted on Sankhya. In Sankhya, there is always two different entities, namely Prakriti and Purusha. They cannot be fused together. So yoga, especially in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Yoga Darshana is rooted on this duality that cannot be bridged at all.
But they want us to be reposed in the Purusha, right? So don't be affected by the Prakriti. The Chitta is equivalent to the Prakriti as well. You have to be able to transcend and then repose in the self.
Yes, in other words, find yourself. So that's where the joy resides, etc. But it doesn't mean Prakriti is useless. It is not the perspective. See, Ishvara will never say Prakriti is useless. What is the perspective of Ishvara on Prakriti? You can ask that question, right? Is it something like a danger? I want to get away from here. It's like a jail. I just want to flee from this place. Is it that perspective? Ishvara will have appreciation for Prakriti also, surely, right? So, Patanjali gives a couple of sutras on Prakriti. Maybe we'll quickly revisit those two sutras. The first sutra he says is Prakasha Kriya Sthiti Sheelam Bhutendriyatmakam Bhoga Apavargartam Drishyam. So the first part of the sutra is just Prakasha Kriya Sthiti. They are synonyms for Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Prakasha means Sattva, Kriya means Rajas, and Sthiti means Tamas. So Prakriti is a field that is composed of the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Patanjali is using Prakasha, Kriya and Sthiti. Bhuta Indriyatmakam. It is the place where the Panchabhutas reside, the inanimate, the five elements, and Indriyas also. The five plus 5 senses and the one mind. They all reside in the Prakriti. So Bhutendriyatmakam. And then the last part is the most significant in this conversation. The Prakriti exists for two reasons. There is a reason why this Prakriti exists. And there are two reasons that Patanjali gives. What are they? They are Bhoga and Apavarga. Bhoga means continued experiences, continued entertainment. Bhoga means continued entertainment with the Chitta Vrittis. So you can spend a long time in the movie. You can sit in the movie theater with a big popcorn and keep on watching movie for 24 hours. Right? Or the Prakriti can be used for Apavarga. Apavarga means it can lead you towards Kaivalyam. Apavarga is a different synonym for Kaivalya. Or you can even say Samadhi. It's what will free you. In order to be in a state of Kaivalya, you need to use Prakriti. So there is a utility there. It is not useless. It is not like a jail where you're trapped. But you have to use Prakriti in order to transcend it, in order to reach that state of Kaivalya. And the next sutra he says, so Prakasha Kriya Sthiti-shilam Bhutendriyatmakam Bhoga Pavargartam Drishyam and Drashta Drishyamatra Shuddhopi Pratyayanu Tadarthayeva Drishyasya Atma. Tadarthayeva Drishyasya Atma. It's a very important sutra. What he says, what Patanjali says here is, the reason why Prakriti exists is not for its own sake. It is to help Purushas find Kaivalya or Bhoga. Purusha can use in whatever way they want. Why is the car there? Is it because car wants enlightenment or Kaivalya? Car is there to serve the person who owns the car. So like that, the Prakriti is there. The reason why Prakriti exists is because it is serving Purusha or Purushas. There's a question, right? In Zen, they say, if nobody is hearing, and when a tree falls to the ground, does it produce sound? Something like that.
If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it really fall?
If a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, did the tree really fall? According to Patanjali, wherever there is Prakriti, there will always be Purusha. Because why unnecessarily create Prakriti when there is no witness to it? You see?
The interesting thing is when you define Prakriti as Sukha, that means always.
That is Purusha.
Sorry, Purusha,
Yeah.
when they are already in the Sukha, assuming that it's a bliss, why experience? To serve itself. Because they're in Sukha with all the, other than the analogy of screen and movie. The screen is like a Purusha and then the Prakriti is like a movie.
So let's examine that.
Yeah.
That question gets asked a lot, namely, if the Purusha is always in a place of Sukha, why are we experiencing misery, suffering, negative emotions, etc.? Right? And the answer that is given by the scholars who gave commentary on the Yoga Sutras is, let's take the example of a millionaire. Lot of money is there. But they forgot that they have the $1 million locked up in somewhere in some corner. They don't know where to find it and somehow even forgotten that they have the money. So first type of person who don't even know that they are rich, they will be like a beggar. We saw this analogy a couple of days back, right? A beggar forgot that they are the prince, that they have a lot of abundance. They forgot. That is one type of people. That is avidya. Another type of people is, they read Yoga Sutras, then they agree with Patanjali, yes, I am a millionaire, but I don't know where I hid the treasure. So Patanjali says, in order to find yourself, what to do, where should you shine your spotlight, where should you search for, which place to dig? Maybe I dug a big hole in the earth and put some $1 million there, or I hid it in a safe and I forgot the password, right? So what do I do? For that, Patanjali gives all these practices, these abhyasas, to find the lost treasure. So Yoga is nothing but a treasure hunt. We are searching for that treasure which is already there within, and we have forgotten it, and we are trying to reach that place.
That's from the Jiva's perspective or the Prakuti's perspective.
Yes.
It's not like Purusha is trying to do it.
Correct.
The sun is always there.
Yes.
It's for the tree or the rest of the universe to know that they are sun.
Yes.
Right?
That's a good point. It's like somebody is dreaming.
Yeah.
In the dream experience, there is maybe tiger is chasing them. They're having a miserable experience. But when you wake up, you are not sad. Oh, why did the tiger did this bad thing to me? They will not have any regret. They will just wake up and feel happy. So from the Purusha's perspective, the same experience will happen.
So Sriramji, you spoke about like happy people, like virtuous people, right? How does courage or lack or fear sit into the perspective of Kaivalyam? Because I think like, especially with the July 4th, we're trying to talk about like freedom, right? But I think one of the tagline of America's what?
How do you
Home of the brave and
home of free and the brave?
Land of the free and home of the brave. So like, where does that
Courage.
Courage or bravery sit into this?
Yeah, in fact, Patanjali has spoken about fear as well as courage. Fear, he uses the word abhinivesha. Yesterday we looked at klesha, right? Klesha, karma, vipaka, ashaya. And I had mentioned that there are 5 kleshas. So the root klesha is avidya, which is ignorance. Then avidya will then manifest as asmita, the feeling of I am, where we attach the I with something that we are not. That is asmita. That means I am the body, or I am my bank balance. So when the bank balance comes down, they'll feel miserable. So the bank is going, the stock going up and down, but why should it affect my experience? That's the perspective yogi will have. But if we invest our identity with something outside, then that becomes asmita. And then it will go to raga and dvesha, which is hankering and aversion. And the 5th klesha is abhinivesha. The reason why Patanjali doesn't use a familiar word, bhaya, he uses the word abhinivesha. If you read in some article, apprehension. Instead of fear, they use apprehension. It looks more scholarly and there is more dispassion on apprehension. If you simply say fear, it seems more raw, right? But there's another reason. Abhinivesha has a scale. In the tanu form, tanu means subtle form, abhinivesha expresses itself as caution. In the extreme form, abhinivesha expresses itself as like paranoia or intense anxiety. It's not just fear, it is super fear.
Is it fear of death?
Some people translate abhinivesha as fear of death also.
A fear of losing anything, because
Yes.
fear of asmita. Asmita is like
What you relate to.
Fear of losing the boundary, whatever you're doing.
So it's not just losing the body,
Yeah.
losing anything.
You associate it.
And any fear is associated with losing something.
Okay.
So caution on one end of the spectrum to like total paranoia and anxiety, that level of fear on the other end of the spectrum.
How do you
All
deal
that is
with such people?
Deal with such people?
Yeah, when fear takes over.
How do you deal with ourselves or others? You can deal with compassion. That's one thing we study. People are suffering. Suffering means person who is expressing kleshas. So for them, offer compassion. How can I help you to relieve yourself of klesha?
Back to the topic of compassion, I think you mentioned in one of the examples, like if someone is maybe expressing anger, you could understand the root cause to be some sort of symptom of something else. But then when we talked about upeksha, it's like you shouldn't really focus on the mistake or try to understand it. So what is kind of the best strategy? To brush things off or to like employ empathy and understand what's going on?
Like, do you really need to examine the mistakes and examine why they're doing it is fine. That is called pratiprasava sadhana.
Okay.
But examining the actual mistakes.
Okay.
oh, you said that, you used these words when you were angry at me. That is not going to take us anywhere. It's like when we throw out trash. You don't open the trash bag and say, okay, what is it that I'm throwing out? What is all the junk that I don't want? We don't need to examine all the trash that we throw out.
Okay.
So when people say something very bad during a state of dukkha, because sukha, dukkha, punya, apunya, right? Dukkha, when people say something bad, it's not a good idea to attach to the particular things that they say. Just realize that they are not who they are. They were not coming from a place of Ishvara. They are coming from a place of periphery. So we don't need to examine that. But the root cause, what is it that makes them say this? Maybe they are suffering inside. Let me be compassionate to that. In that sense, it is helpful. Anujaji, you had a question.
Yes, as you were talking about abhinivesha and the subtle sense, tanmatra is like fear. And you had mentioned to us that we'll discuss tanmatra in detail later on. I know about dog and owl and cat. They have some tanmatra. Like what dog can hear, we cannot hear. What cat can see at night, we cannot see. But what about our tanmatra? I understand about from other perspective. What kind of tanmatra do we have? How can we cultivate, which may help us to become more sensitive, right? Tanmatra is like very subtle.
Yes. So let's look at tanmatra. I'll keep it short because it's a big topic. It's what do they say? Pandora's box. Pandora's box. But tanmatra is a very fascinating topic. I am really fascinated by the topic of tanmatra, especially in Sankhya. They talk about tanmatra, and in Vedanta, they give additional spotlight on tanmatras. Tanmatra doesn't come from the word tanu. Tanu means subtle. Tanmatra is made by combining two words, tat matra. Tat matra. And before we look at the meaning of tanmatra, all of us need tanmatras in order to sense anything. In order to sense light, there should be some tanmatra in the organ of perception. Tanmatra. So what is tanmatra? Okay, let's do a show of hands. How many of us have heard of the term Panchikaranam? Panchikaranam. Not familiar? Okay, so let's give a brief whirlwind tour of Panchikaranam and Tanmatra. They are very closely linked. So this comes from a Vedantic theory. It sheds spotlight on what Tanmatra really is. When we talk about the five bhutas, the Panchabhutas, none of the five Panchabhutas come in its pure form. Even what we call solid, I'm sure you'll agree with me, there's a lot of space here. When we look inside the subatomic level, even in the atomic level, there is so much space, very little of actually solid matter. Proton, neutron, that nucleus is very tiny, there's a lot of space. So the perspective is all of the five Panchabhutas, Mahabhutas as they say, they're comprised of a proportion of each of the five in its pure form. The pure five, when they combine, mix them together, that is called Panchikaranam. Panchikaranam means combination of five. And depending on which is most dominant, that is how we experience it. In a solid matter, the pure earth element, the proportion of that is more than the pure Akasha element, the pure water element, fire element, etc. Is it clear so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So like that, in the air, there is a little bit of solid, there is a little bit of liquid. We can say vapor, there is a little bit of vapor. Even in water, there is a little bit of dissolved, some earth element. There is a little bit of air that is trapped, etc. There is some temperature for that water, so there is the Agni element. So like that, all five, they appear in mixture. A mixture is called Panchikaranam. The 5 things mixed thoroughly is called Panchikaranam. So let's go back to Tanmatra now. Tanmatra means Tat plus Matra. That's how we split the words. Tat Matra means that alone. Matra means only. That only. That means each of the 5 in its pure form. So the air element in the pure air element form. The space element is like a vacuum. There is nothing else in the vacuum. That is pure space element. And then you have pure earth element. If you can conceive of that. I mean, it's very difficult to imagine such a thing. But say it's a neutron star. I don't know. It's like so packed that there is, even at the atomic level, the nucleus are touching each other. And then you have all these 5 Tanmatras. According to Sankhya and Vedanta, it is because of Tanmatras we are able to perceive things. Another way to put it is the sensor that senses things should be more subtle than what it is sensing. To give an example, if you want to measure the diameter of a proton, you're not going to use a foot ruler, right? Or if you want to measure the distance between, say, India and Australia, you're not going to use a foot ruler again. You see, it doesn't make sense. So whatever you are going to sense or measure, matra is also means measure. In fact, the English word meter, to measure distance, meter, comes from matra. Tanmatra, you can measure only with the pure element because it is more subtle than what it is sensing. You see? So in order to sense the earth element, see, each of the 5 senses are associated with sensing each of the 5 Mahabhutas. Eyes respond to fire element. And the sensation of smell responds to the earth element. The touch, sensation of touch responds to the air element. Sound responds to the space element. That's how it is described. So there should be something in our sensors that is more subtle than what it is sensing. So if you want to sense water, water elements is sensed through the tongue. So whatever we are sensing should be more subtle. And what is more subtle than the Panchabhutas? It is the pure form of that. So there is some amount of the Tanmatras that are residing in our sensory organs. Not the eyes, but in the subtle body level, the subtle level.
Can you repeat the Panchabhutas and the sensory organ, the connection again?
Yeah, let's look at subtle to the gross. The subtlest of the 5 is the Akasha. Akasha is sensed by the ear, sound. Akasha, sound, ear. And then next to Akashat Vayuhu, Vayoragnihi, Agnerapah, Adbyah Prithvi, Prithivya Oshadhibhyaha, Oshadhibhyo Annam, Annat Purushaha. The Taittiriya Upanishad, it says how it evolves. So first is the Akasha, and then Akashat Vayuhu. So Vayu, air element, is sensed by the skin, the touch. Touch skin is air element. And then Vayor Agni, Agni element is the ice. Agni, light, ice. Agnerapah, from Agni you go to water element. Water element, taste. So whatever is sensed by the tongue. And then the last one is the earth element. Adbyah Prithvi, the earth element. It is sensed by the nose, the sensation of smell. That is the earth element. And the sensors actually have the Tanmatras. Without the Tanmatras, we will not be able to sense. For example, an iPhone. I know this because I worked at Apple. Don't worry, I'm not going to reveal any secrets. So if in the iPhone, it is sensitive to touch, right? So the sensors, the array of sensors on the touch panel of the iPhone should be smaller than the size of the finger. If there's only one sensor for the whole display, then wherever you touch, you will not, it doesn't know exactly the precise location of where it is. The sensor should be small enough that if it is too small, then maybe it will be expensive. We don't have like tiny fingers. So what is the tiniest finger? Maybe a baby finger. So your sensor should be at least the size, as small as the size of the smallest finger. So like that. I forgot how this started. Yes, question.
But no, feel free to finish. I would say
Oh,
on-
I had finished.
on-
Because Anujaji's
Asked about the
Oh, yes,
Tanmatra,
yes,
the
yes.
centrist.
Yeah, thank you, Anujaji. I think
So essentially, Tanmatra is not limited to like what Anuja said, like the eagle or other thing. We all function
Yes.
only to Tanmatra.
yes, Tanmatras are part of the subtle body. When we read Shankara's work, the physical body is comprised only of Panchi Karanam. Panchi Krita Panchamahabhutaihi Kritam, he says for the physical body. For the subtle body, he says Apanchi Krita Panchamahabhutaihi Kritam, and etc. And it also includes prana and few other things in the subtle body. But the Tanmatras actually reside in the subtle body.
My question was if you could maybe just share with a brief response from the Sankhya perspective to the Advaita perspective that there is no duality.
The Sankhya does not even address that because it was the first thing that
Yeah.
evolved out of the three Nivritti Shastras, namely Sankhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. Sankhya was the first one that was propounded by sage Kapila.
But if
Doesn't
there
even
were-
talk about whether they're one or not. It even says Purushas are many.
Okay.
Even at that level, there is no union there. But it doesn't mean it is against the oneness because
Okay.
they didn't even ask that question.
No, I mean, I understand that. I just meant like if there was a modern day Sankhya philosopher, what their response might be to the Advaita perspective of
Yes,
non-duality.
actually, it goes on. There is a sibling rivalry, as it's called,
Actually, they-
between Sankhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. And if you look at the, I think there's a name for the physics. There are 35 basic elements, right? There's electron, and proton is not a basic element. It can be further divided into quarks and all that. So the whole universe is constructed out of a building block of 35 elements. One of them is the Higgs boson, God particle. So the perspective that the modern science brings is very close to Sankhya. Only thing they miss out on Ishvara. They forget the Eka Tattva totally. They still have the Aneka Tattva, but in some sense, it's very close to Sankhya. Sankhya says 24 building blocks. Modern science says 35 building blocks, which is still, forget the number. At least it's a few, it's countable. So there is a lot of commonality between Sankhya and modern science. Standard model of physics, that's what it's called. Standard model of physics.
The thing is, but if you look closely, when you define Purusha as the Nitya, Atma as the Nitya Suchisuka Atma, it almost equates with the Advaita level. When something that is indivisible, there is no division, there is no duality.
Yes, but is the Purusha within you same as the Purusha in another?
Like what we talked about, does it even matter?
That's what Sankhya said. It doesn't matter. So
Does
let's
not
not
matter.
explore.
Right?
So Vedantins had some reason to explore that.
Because it's equivalent to Satchit Ananda. If you look at these things, it's just like Nitya Suchisuka Atma, it's similar to Satchit Ananda. So it's almost like a futile, it's just like a
You could argue both ways. It's like you can hire a lawyer to put forth very convincing arguments on both sides, right? And it's been happening. Debates that are happening even today. And so one thing that Sankhya say to strengthen their argument is, if you're all one, if one person gets enlightened, I should also be enlightened. Right? They are enlightened and I still have a tummy ache. So it's not fair.
But the enlightenment is from the non-enlightened is from that other ignorant Vedya perspective. From the
That's what Vedanta will say.
Vedanta will say.
So like that, you can imagine
Yeah.
this going back and forth.
Generally, the equally enlightened is and they calls the Ishvara.
Yes, and there's a talk by Swami Sarvapriyananda that talks about this. He says it will never happen. You want the play to keep going on.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, Patanjali gives a sutra in the second chapter which talks about a similar thing. Sutra goes, Kritartam prati nashtamapya nashtam tat anya sadharanatvat. What it says is, for someone who has attained the highest, the Kaivalya, just because they have achieved the highest, it doesn't mean the Prakriti will cease to exist because it is there for other people. Like when you go from, say, Dallas to San Francisco, I'm making a trip tomorrow, right? Once I make my trip, the airplanes are still active. They are serving other passengers. So doesn't mean that just because one person got enlightened, the show is going to stop.
Asteroid comes and gets close off.
One got to more now, but the rest are in the Boga state.
So that brings one more question. What we saw earlier, where Patanjali says, Tadarthayeva drishyasya atma. Only for the sake of serving a Purusha does the Prakriti exist. So when we look deeply at it, at the meaning of this, Prakriti will never be there when there is no Purushas. Maybe there is life on planet, we are just not seeing it from our wavelength. Maybe there is life. Or maybe it is serving us because we are observing it. It is there because it is showing its presence, although from billions of light years, and the observer is us. That could also be another interpretation.
But it's
Pramana, right? So, can you sense that extraterritorial, right? At their level of perception?
Ishvara can,
Ishvara, yes.
because Ishvara is the highest Siddha Purusha, and they can.
That's what Krishna and Vishwarupa, right? You know, the one cosmic body, everything is happening in their plane.
Yes.
And
Many
then-
times when I read the Vishwarupa Darshana,
Yeah.
it feels as though watching through a telescope all the big things that are happening in the center of the galaxy,
Yeah.
how it is, all the stars are falling in and making the supermassive black hole even bigger.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of parallels.
when we say, Prakriti will not exist without Purusha or Prakriti exists to serve Purusha, I think one perspective to consider is for Purusha to exist, there must be prana, and only when Prakriti touches Purusha, then there is prana, and therefore.
Actually, Purusha can exist without
Yeah.
the body. We saw that, right? Videha.
Yeah.
Prana exists in the subtle body. So it is possible for Purusha to exist without Prakriti.
Without
Prakriti, it is there to serve the Purusha. When we read the Sankhya Karika, it gives an analogy. Prakriti is like a dancer in a king's court. And the Prakriti is trying to entertain the king by doing all kind of, play and display, different dance. And at one point, Prakriti discovers that, okay, the king is entertained for a few minutes, but then his thought is elsewhere. And at some point, the Prakriti decides, okay, king doesn't care, let me just sleep. So that will happen at some time.
Yeah.
I mean, when we interpret that, the Prakriti will just dissolve. It may happen. I don't know. There are many ways to interpret this analogy. Yes,
So-
Anujaji?
Shriramji, so in a subtle body, there is a prana, there is a tanmatra and all that. What is in the causal body? Which
Yes.
is still deeper than the
Let's
subtle.
look at that. The definition of physical body. Let's start with the physical body. Definition of physical body is Panchikrita Panchamaha Bhutaihi Kritam Satkarma Janyam Sukhadukkadi Bhogayatanam Shariram. And the Shariram undergoes Shat Vikaravat. What is the Shat Vikara? He says in the same, this is by Shankara. And the Shat Vikara he says in the same statement. It's not a sutra, it's a prose. And the Shat Vikaras, I forget right now. Asti, Jayate, Vardate, Viparinamate, and there's two more. So the thing is, the physical body is comprised of the Panchikaranam, 5 mixed up elements, and it is a vehicle for the Purusha to experience Sukha Dukkha. And in order to get this vehicle, there should be a Satkarma. In other words, we should be blessed to have a physical body, he says. And he says the same thing for subtle body also later. So this is the physical body. It is constituted of the Panchikaranam. And the subtle body has 17 parts. There are 17 parts to the subtle body. Apanchikrita panchamahabhutaihi kritam satkarmajanyam. And then the rest of it I forget. It talks about pancha pranadayaha, pancha pranadayaha, manas buddhi, manascha eka, buddhischa eka, and then the 10 indriyas. All of these together constitute the subtle body. So once again, what is the subtle body? It is the anatomy of the subtle body is comprised of the 5 jnana indriyas, the 5 karma indriyas, the pancha pranas, 5, and then manas and buddhi. So it has 17 parts. Now, if you look at the Sankhya, 24 tattvas are there. 5 of them have been consumed by physical body. Panchikrita Panchamahabhutai. 17 by subtle body. So 5 plus 17, 22. Last 2 are in the Karana Sharira. So what is there in the Karana Sharira? When we look at it, yesterday I mentioned Karma Shaya is in the Karana Sharira, causal body. Karma, all our karmas are in the causal body. Swami Sarvapriyanandaji gives a very beautiful analogy. The hardware, a computer that you buy, is the physical body. The software is the subtle body. Right? So, for example, when we change our phone, when we go from iPhone 14 to iPhone 15, right? That's what we all want, iPhone 15. So all the software, we simply transfer it. All the data we transfer. Data is actually Karana Sharira. Software is the subtle body, the Sukshma Sharira. So the data is the Karana Sharira. So all the Karma Shayas is actually residing in the Karana Sharira.
Maybe this Ishvara, the chief data scientist.
Oh, I cannot hear Anujaji. I think you're on mute.
There are 2 things in Karan Sharira. One is those tank of karma, and what is the second thing?
Oh, the other one is called Mula Prakriti. That Mula Prakriti is the base of the entire Prakriti. It is the substratum of all Prakriti from which everything has arisen.
Not the personality of the person, not the person is, how the person is, not that thing. What is the Mula Prakriti? Mula Prakriti is in the causal body.
Yes, and a part of it is within us also. There is a collective Mula Prakriti and there is a individual Mula Prakriti as well. Every element, there's a collective and there's an individual.
We can do some pranayam now, right?
Yeah, time check. Oh,
Yes. We,
What is it?
the time is 5:25. So what can we do? So what shall we do? I think we should conclude.
Do Brahmari or something. Brahmari.
Brahmari. Shall we do Brahmari? And then we will end with a Shanti Mantra. So let's sit with the spine upright. And before we position our hands, let's close our eyes and let's allow the body and mind to settle down. Let's take a deep breath in and breathe out. So before we begin the Brahmari Pranayam, we are going to apply the Shanmukhi Mudra. But before that, because after we start the Shanmukhi Mudra and the Brahmari, we will not be able to hear the instruction. So I'll just state it up front. We're going to do 3 deep breaths. So breathing in is using Ujjayi, and breathing out will be the humming sound. We're going to lengthen the duration of the humming sound for as long as possible. So let's apply the Shanmukhi Mudra. Position the fingertips to close the eyes, symbolically close the nostrils, and place the ring finger and pinky finger above and below the lips. And you can close the ears with the thumb, and you can begin the practice. And once we have completed 3 rounds, you may release the arms, release the mudra. And with eyes closed, notice the sound of the Brahmari has created a space of silence. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha Harihi Om. And gently, let's open our eyes. So thank you everyone for the amazing 4 days. It was nice, enjoyable discussions on the different topics in the Yoga Sutras. Thank you for your enthusiastic participation, and thank you for your tapas, because sometimes even when tummy was a little hungry or we were continuing to sit down, so it's a tapas. So thanks for your enthusiasm.
Thank you very
Namaste.
much. Namaste, Sriram.
Thank
Namaste.
you. Namaskaram. Thank you so much.
Yes, Sriram.
I noticed that female flute was a